There's a quiet war raging inside every man, a battle that no one else sees, not his friends, not his parents, not even the woman who sleeps beside him. It's the war between his impulses and his purpose. In the modern world, lust has become one of the most powerful forces shaping male behavior. Everywhere you look, there's something designed to pull a man's attention toward desire. Advertisements dripping with seduction, social media feeds filled with perfection, and endless streams of temptation just a click away. But what happens to a man who lives in this constant flood of stimulation? What happens to his mind, to his motivation, to his spirit? The truth is harsh. Lust doesn't just live in the body, it rewires the brain. It trains men to chase pleasure instead of progress, comfort instead of challenge, and fantasy instead of reality. It makes him forget that the same energy driving his desires can also build empires, create art, and shape destiny. Many men today feel lost, restless, unmotivated. They blame their jobs, their relationships, the world around them. But few realize that the real thief of their strength is invisible. It's the addiction to instant gratification, disguised as freedom, but functioning as a quiet form of slavery. Lust is not evil, it's human. It's part of our biology, but uncontrolled, it becomes like fire. In a dry forest, it consumes everything. And when a man lets lust lead him, he becomes a slave to his instincts rather than the master of them. Yet there's a path few dare to walk, one that seems old-fashioned, even strange in today's world. It's the path of abstinence. The decision to take control of one's desires, to redirect that energy into discipline, strength, and focus. Abstinence is not repression. It's redirection. It's the art of turning the chaos of desire into the clarity of purpose. Men who practice it often describe profound changes, not just physical, but mental, emotional, even spiritual. Their confidence grows, their vision sharpens, their energy, once scattered, becomes concentrated like a laser. So the question we must ask is simple. What really happens when a man chooses to rise above his lust? How does abstinence reshape his mind, his chemistry, his destiny? And could the very thing society mocks, self-control, be the secret key to becoming unstoppable? Because maybe the strongest man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers himself. To understand what lust really does to men, we first have to look at the human brain, the machinery of desire. Inside every man's mind, there is a small structure called the nucleus accumbens, the reward center. It lights up when he achieves something meaningful, like finishing a project, hitting a goal, or winning a competition. But it also lights up when he watches explicit content, scrolls through images, or experiences sexual excitement. The problem is that the brain doesn't distinguish between the two. It only registers pleasure. When a man repeatedly seeks pleasure through lust, he begins to reprogram his brain's reward system. What once required effort, hard work, progress, discipline, becomes replaced by shortcuts. He can get the same dopamine rush with no effort at all, and slowly, without realizing it, his brain starts craving the easy path. This is where modern society traps him. Every scroll, every click, every image is designed to pull at that system. A system millions of years old, built for survival and reproduction. But now, instead of being a source of strength, it becomes a weakness that others profit from. Neuroscientists have found that chronic exposure to artificial stimulation changes brain chemistry. It desensitizes dopamine receptors, meaning the man now needs more and more stimulation to feel the same level of satisfaction. In time, he becomes restless, anxious, and numb. Things that once brought him joy, music, conversation, achievement, begin to lose their color. His motivation fades. His drive to create weakens. He loses interest in real women, because fantasy offers him a version that never rejects him, never challenges him, never asks for commitment, and when real intimacy finally appears, he's often unprepared to face it, emotionally disconnected, mentally fragmented, spiritually hollow. Lust, unchecked, becomes not a pleasure, but a prison. Now, psychology gives us a name for this process: habituation. It means the more we're exposed to a stimulus, the less impact it has over time. It's why the first bite of a dessert feels amazing, but the 10th feels ordinary. The same rule applies to lust. When overstimulated, the male brain stops responding normally. It begins to crave stronger forms of stimulation, pushing boundaries further and further. This is why many men today feel drained. It's not just mental fatigue. It's chemical exhaustion, dopamine depletion. The brain is overstimulated, but underfulfilled. It's chasing highs that no longer satisfy. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine taking that same energy, that same biological force, and redirecting it. When a man practices abstinence, especially from compulsive indulgence, something extraordinary begins to happen. At first, it's uncomfortable. The urges rise like waves, and his mind resists the change. But slowly, the brain recalibrates. Dopamine sensitivity returns. Small things begin to bring joy again. A conversation, a walk, the sound of rain. His energy, once scattered in 1,000 directions, begins to consolidate. His thoughts sharpen. His focus deepens. His posture changes. He walks differently, not out of arrogance, but control. Abstinence is not about suppression. It's about transmutation, a term the psychologist Carl Jung often used. Jung believed that sexual energy is one of the most powerful creative forces in human nature. He called it libido, not in a purely sexual sense, but as a universal life energy. When that energy isn't wasted, it can be transformed into ambition, art, leadership, and purpose. This is why many great philosophers, monks, and warriors spoke of controlling desire as the highest form of discipline. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, believed that freedom comes not from indulging desires, but from mastering them. No man is free who is not master of himself, wrote Epictetus. They saw lust as an external chain, a force that binds the soul to the flesh, blinding him from reason. Plato described the human soul as a chariot pulled by 2 horses, one representing reason, the other desire. The wise man learns to guide both, not destroy them. To let desire run free is to crash the chariot. To deny it entirely is to lose the fire of life. True mastery lies in control, not denial, not indulgence. Even Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood as an advocate of chaos, wrote about the power of sublimation, transforming sexual energy into creativity and greatness. He said that the highest type of man is one who channels his instincts toward creation instead of destruction. You can see this pattern throughout history. Monks in temples, artists in solitude, inventors obsessed with their work, they all learned to focus their energy on something higher than pleasure. Their abstinence was not weakness, it was a weapon. Modern psychology supports this idea. Studies on delayed gratification, like the famous marshmallow experiment, show that individuals who learn to delay pleasure perform better in life, higher academic success, stronger relationships, better emotional health, In essence, abstinence trains the same muscle, the ability to wait, to resist, to control. When a man abstains, his testosterone levels stabilize, his willpower increases, his confidence rises, not from arrogance, but from the simple knowledge that he can control himself. He stops chasing validation. He becomes grounded, calm, present. There's also a deeper emotional shift. Without constant dopamine floods, he begins to feel more, not less. He experiences real emotion instead of the numbed highs and lows of addiction. He reconnects with empathy, patience, gratitude. His conversations become more meaningful. His eyes gain intensity, not of lust, but of awareness. And perhaps the most profound change is spiritual. When lust no longer rules a man, he starts seeing the world differently. Women are no longer objects of desire, but mirrors of beauty, grace, and soul. His relationships stop being transactional. He no longer needs to consume affection. He can give it. Abstinence, then, is not just a practice of restraint. It's a path to rebirth. It's the awakening of potential energy. The same energy that once enslaved him now becomes the force that builds him. But let's not romanticize it. The journey is hard. Temptation never disappears. It only changes shape. The digital age surrounds us with triggers, endless notifications, suggestive media, the illusion of connection. Practicing self-control today requires more courage than ever before. Yet that's what makes it powerful. When a man says no to his lower nature, he's not rejecting pleasure. He's choosing freedom. And in that choice, something sacred happens. His self-respect returns. Because every time he resists, he grows stronger. Every time he endures, he takes back a piece of himself. And with time, he no longer needs to fight, because mastery becomes his nature. Abstinence teaches men one of life's greatest truths. Pleasure is fleeting, but inner power endures. When you can say no to your impulses, you gain the ability to say yes to your purpose. Every philosophy worth its name eventually asks one question: what does it mean to be free? And this question sits at the heart of lust and abstinence, because lust promises freedom. The freedom to do what you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want, but whoever you want. But the truth is more paradoxical. The more a man indulges that kind of freedom, the less free he actually becomes. Each indulgence strengthens the chain. Each moment of surrender weakens the will, until one day he no longer chooses. He obeys. He obeys his urges, his habits, his cravings. That's not freedom. That's servitude, wrapped in pleasure. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once said, "Freedom is obedience to a law one gives to oneself. To live by your higher reason, not your lower appetite. That is freedom." But modern culture doesn't reward self-mastery. It rewards consumption. The entire machinery of media, marketing, and entertainment thrives on one principle: keep men hungry, distracted, and easy to control. The lust industry alone is worth billions. And it's not just explicit media. It's woven into the fabric of everything: fashion, music videos, advertisements. Because the distracted man spends more, clicks more, scrolls more. He chases stimulation to fill a void that discipline could have healed. When a man is lost in lust, he doesn't build. He consumes. He doesn't protect. He pursues comfort. And when that becomes the collective state of men, civilization weakens. There's a reason ancient societies revered chastity, not as repression, but as power. They knew that the man who controlled his seed controlled his destiny. That's not moral dogma. It's energetic truth. Now, psychology adds another layer to this. Some argue that repressing sexual energy can cause guilt, shame, or neurosis. Freud famously believed that suppressing the libido could manifest as anxiety or obsession. But what Freud missed, and Jung later clarified, is that repression and redirection are not the same thing. Repression is denial, pretending the desire doesn't exist. Redirection is awareness, acknowledging the desire, but choosing where to aim it. The man who represses becomes bitter, closed, and fearful of his own nature. The man who redirects becomes powerful, creative, and spiritually awake. Modern science confirms this idea in subtle ways. Studies on mindfulness and self-control show that awareness of urges, without acting on them, strengthens neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for willpower and long-term thinking. In short, every time you resist temptation, you literally rewire your brain for strength. So abstinence isn't anti-sex, it's pro-consciousness. It's the art of choosing rather than reacting. It's not about denying pleasure forever. It's about no longer being enslaved by it. And yet, society mocks this. The man who chooses self-restraint is called weak, strange, or repressed. But deep down, many know the truth. It takes far more courage to control yourself than to indulge yourself. There's another question worth asking. What happens when a generation of men learns to control their desires? History gives us a clue. The samurai of Japan practiced seishin tenren, spiritual forging through discipline, often including abstinence. They believed that sexual restraint preserved the warrior's focus and spirit. In ancient Greece, athletes preparing for the Olympics would abstain before competition to heighten strength and mental clarity. And in spiritual traditions, from Buddhist monks to Christian mystics, abstinence was seen as the doorway to enlightenment because it purified attention. All these traditions shared one message: control over desire leads to clarity, and clarity of mind leads to mastery of life. Now contrast that with the modern man, overstimulated, distracted, drained. He wakes up and checks his phone. He scrolls through endless content. He's bombarded with images that pull his attention downward instead of inward. His focus, the most precious currency of his consciousness, is scattered into fragments. He wonders why he feels lost. But how could he not, when his mind is never still long enough to hear his own thoughts? Abstinence, then, becomes an act of rebellion. In a world addicted to stimulation, a man who practices restraint becomes dangerous, not in the sense of harm, but in power, because he can't be manipulated. He doesn't chase, he chooses. He begins to see clearly. Every advertisement, every distraction, every false promise of pleasure was never meant to empower him, only to weaken him. And once he sees that, something shifts permanently. He stops looking outward for satisfaction. He starts building it inward. That's when transformation begins, not because he escaped lust, but because he learned to master it. Still, balance matters. Abstinence without purpose can become pride or repression. Lust without awareness becomes chaos. The key is harmony, to honor the body without becoming enslaved by it, to enjoy desire when it's sacred and silence it when it's destructive. True masculinity in its highest form isn't about aggression or dominance. It's about sovereignty, ruling over one's thoughts, emotions, and appetites. That's the kind of strength the world rarely teaches, but deeply respects when it appears. When a man walks into a room with quiet self-control, people feel it. It's not arrogance, it's presence. Because his energy is not scattered outward, it's centered within. He no longer needs validation. He radiates certainty. And that, more than any physical attribute, is what makes him magnetic. When a man finally understands what lust does to him, something inside shifts. He sees that it was never just about pleasure. It was about control. Every image, every fantasy, every impulse that promised relief was quietly stealing something far greater: his focus, his strength, his fire. But when he decides to reclaim that fire, when he practices self-mastery instead of self-indulgence, everything begins to realign. His mornings feel lighter. His thoughts become sharper. His goals, once distant, start to call him forward. With a quiet intensity, he begins to realize that the energy he once spent chasing short-term pleasure is the same energy that fuels long-term greatness. And in that moment, lust transforms from his captor into his teacher. Because abstinence isn't the death of desire, it's its evolution. It's the realization that desire was never the enemy. Unconsciousness was. That the real power lies not in denying the body, but in commanding it. When a man controls his lust, he rediscovers what it means to lead himself. He no longer needs the world's approval. He stops begging for attention. His worth is no longer tied to who he can attract, but to what he can become. He finds peace in solitude, not loneliness. Discipline becomes his comfort. Purpose becomes his pleasure. And from that foundation, he can finally love, not with need, but with strength. Not as a beggar of affection, but as a giver of presence. That's the difference between a man enslaved by desire and a man guided by wisdom. In a world that glorifies indulgence, restraint has become rare. But maybe that's why it's sacred. Every generation needs men who can say no when others can't. Men who can hold the line within themselves. Because when they do, they create ripples in their relationships, in their work, in the collective strength of society itself. If lust weakens men, then mastery restores them. If indulgence blurs vision, abstinence sharpens it. And if pleasure enslaves, purpose liberates. So let the world chase distractions. Let it drown in the noise of temptation. You choose silence, choose strength, choose self-control, not because it's easy, but because it's rare. And the rarest things in life are wise the most valuable. Because at the end of all desires, beyond every craving and every impulse, there stands a single truth. The man who conquers himself needs to conquer nothing else.